Hello viewers, welcome back. Let's now look at preferred design process. In other words, we are looking at the preferred model design. Preferred model design. Now, before we get into a discussion about model design, we really want to understand the motive for modeling a business. One of the things that we often say is that you really don't have a deep understanding of the business until you model it. In other words, you get to understand the business until you have modeled the business. We wholeheartedly believe that this is actually true, because building a financial model essentially forces you to understand all the aspects of the business. So the first step in this process would be for us to think about a business that we need to understand and we need to model. So that would be the first motive, that we are going in for modeling this business just because we want to actually know. So that's one of the motive as to why we may actually model the business. So, as I said, we need to first of all think the reason as why we model businesses. So, we would start by understanding all the different aspects of the business. In other words, the only way for you to understand the business is when you have modeled it. So we start by understanding the business, and we start by understanding all the different aspects of the business, like how it generates its revenue. How is the business generates its revenue? How is the business generates the revenue? The second thing, we would also try to understand the cost structure in terms of the variable costs and then the fixed costs. So the other thing that we need also to put into consideration is we need to understand the tax. In other words, we need to understand the tax regime or the tax regulation. So that if the company is going to have current taxes or will it be able to defer some of its taxes into the future? In other words, we need to know that are we going to be having what we call deferred taxes, or we are going to have the current taxes. So that's all by understanding the business, all the different aspects of the business that we are dealing in. So once we understand all these different aspects in our business, then, and it is only then we can now start doing what we call modeling. We try now to look at the model, or we start modeling the business, because it is after we have understood all the different aspects that our business is dealing with, and it is only and only when we have understood that, that's when we can be able to come up and say we start building our finance model. So now we start building the finance model of that business that we've understood. So a financial model is really a replica of the business. And what we find is that replicating the business into an electronic format actually forces you to understand all the aspects of the business. In other words, replicating the business into, or trying to change the business, or try to transform the business into an electronic format through what we call the model, it gets you to an understanding of all the aspects that are within the business. Now, it's quite common to think about the finance or the financial model. It's quite to think about the financial model as the end goal in this exercise. In other words, when we are looking at the financial model itself, look at it in the sense that it is the end product or the end objective of this whole exercise of understanding the business. So, when actually we like to think about the end goal as being, because for you may be thinking that the end goal of this activity that we are doing is actually for us to be able to get the financial model itself. But it is actually, we like to think about the end goal of whichever activity that we go through as the solid understanding. In other words, we want it to be as being the solid understanding of the underlying business. In other words, it just so happens that the financial models itself, or the financial model itself, helps us to get the solid understanding. Because for you, you may look at me, my target is actually to get the financial model. Yes, we may actually finally get the financial model as our outcome. But now the thing is, it is the financial model that is going to help us understand, or we get a solid understanding of the underlying business or the underlying transactions of our business. So as we move forward, we want to start to think about model design as a critical step, because this model design is something that is skipped over by some of the people that try to do model building, or the model builders. They just rush in the process of building the model. And here at our YouTube channel, we like to be really thoughtful and intentional about the model design. Now, let's start by considering one way that we would design our financial model. We could start by thinking about all of the inputs, we could think through all the necessary calculations that we need to perform with these inputs that we've got, all these variables that we have here, and that would lead us all the way through to our outputs. So these outputs, they are the end results that are coming out of those calculations that we did. So it is these outputs that are going to be coming out of the financial model. And I hope this seems to make a lot of sense to you guys, because we start with the inputs, we make sure that we get the necessary computations, and it is through these computations that we get the outputs. So intuitively, we are going to go through a linear or a chronological fashion from the inputs all the way to these outputs. So the model outputs, these are going to be our financial models. Financial model, the outputs that we've gotten. Now, it's going to be logical. In other words, it's going to be like a logical process. But what we are actually approaching, things from a different perspective or from a different angle, especially when we are designing these models. So we are trying to go through a logical process of moving from the inputs that we have all the way to the financial model, all the outputs that we need, all our endpoint, because it is the financial model our audience is interested in looking at. But to get to the outputs, we have to go through the different aspects from the inputs. We do some calculations on those inputs, and then we can come to our financial model. So, although it seems a bit logical in terms of what we do at first and what follows, but that's what we are going to go through in our discussion. And that's the emphasis that we want to have in the first place here at our YouTube channel. So thank you for watching. Let's meet in the next video as we are discussing the same preferred model design process. We are still on the same thing for model design.